Good evening. Welcome to tonight's devotional. I hope your Monday has been a good day and finishes up strong, either with this devotional or if you're a late night owl or whatever, maybe a good old Duke Western, John Wayne. Who knows? However you want to spend your evening. Tonight we are continuing with Jesus' parables as revealed in the Gospel of Matthew. We are in chapter 20 and we're going to be reading verses 1 through 16, the parable of the workers in the vineyard. And I love this one because it messes with us. Of course, I guess all parables kind of mess with you. The idea of a hook is there, that it leaves you disquiet a bit so that you have to think and ponder and reflect in order to change the way you view the world. So Jesus says in verses 1 and following, "For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire workers for his vineyard. He agreed to pay them a denarius for the day and sent them into his vineyard. About 9 in the morning he went out and saw others standing in the marketplace doing nothing. He told them, 'You also go and work in my vineyard. I'll pay you whatever is right.' So they went. He went out again about noon and about 3 in the afternoon and did the same thing. About 5 in the afternoon he went out and found still others standing around. He asked them, 'Why have you been standing here all day long doing nothing?' 'Because no one's hired us,' they answered. He said to them, 'You also go and work in my vineyard.' When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his foreman, 'Call the workers and pay them their wages, beginning with the last ones hired and going on to the first.' The workers who were hired about 5 in the afternoon came and each received a denarius. So when those came who were hired first, they expected to receive more. But each one of them also received a denarius. When they received it, they began to grumble against the landowner. 'These who were hired last worked only 1 hour,' they said, 'and you've made them equal to us, who have borne the burden of the work in the heat of the day.' But he answered one of them, 'I'm not being unfair to you, friend. Didn't you agree to work for a denarius? Take your pay and go. I want to give the one who was hired last the same as I gave you. Don't I have the right to do what I want with my own money? Or are you envious because I am generous? So the last will be first, and the first will be last.'" I told you it's going to mess with you. So what happens in this day and age is that if you wanted to find work that day, you were a day laborer, you didn't have an ongoing profession, you didn't have a carpentry shop, so to speak, you were a day laborer. And so you would go to the marketplace. You would go to that kind of I don't know what to call it, the crossroads of the village or the town where everybody came. But it was understood that if you were looking for work, that's where you'd be. You would go there and you would try to get work. And so the early bird gets the worm. Guys were there early, eager to work, and they received a day's wage, which was a denarius. It was a fair wage. It was agreed upon. They had no hesitation about working through the heat of the day for a whole day, doing day laborers' work for day laborers' wages. Up till now, the story seems perfectly normal. I mean, they didn't have a manpower or a temp agency or anything like that back then. You went to the marketplace and you hoped somebody needed you. You'd go there and you'd wait, and the landowner would come and hire you to get some work done. And then he goes through the day, and the landowner sees a little bit later there's some more guys, and he sends them to the field. More guys, sends them to the field. More guys, sends them to the field. The interesting thing is he only negotiated the price with the very first ones, in the morning. And the guys were perfectly fine with a denarius for that whole day's wage. It was a fair wage. It was, in fact, the going rate. And so the next 3 groups, it says nothing about the landowner offering them a denarius, but merely saying, "Go get to work and I'll pay you what's fair," to the second group. And then just go on, get to work. And they all went. They all agreed. In some ways, you can see why this would be the case. I mean, if you missed the first batch of hiring for the day and you were still there later on, it's looking like you're going home hungry. You don't have any money to buy any food with that day. You're standing around and somebody's offering you a job and you've already lost most of the hope that you had. You're going to jump on it. You're going to go because something's better than nothing. They didn't even complain. They didn't ask a question. They went and worked. And then the landowner did something fascinating. Because even if he wanted to be generous, he tells the foreman to pay the last people first, in full view of the people who'd been hired first. It's fascinating, isn't it? We could go on all kinds of rabbit trails here. We could go on the free market, property rights trail if we wanted to, about the right to negotiate your own price, that it's his money and his land and he gets to dispose of it as he wishes. We could go that route if we like to. But in many ways, in almost every way, the main point of the parable is the Gentiles are going to get the same reward the Jews get. We're not talking here about a day's wage for a day's work, or the day approaching the end, and at the last hour they join the task force at 5 p.m. to get done at 6 p.m. We're talking about the fact that at the end of time, if you have selected Christ before you die, heaven is still your reward. This is very similar to the parable of the prodigal son, where the older brother who stayed and worked and remained faithful was hacked off. That his younger brother comes home after being profligate and spending everything, and he gets a party thrown for him. The generosity of the landowner is up to the landowner. He chose to be generous. It is not unfair. Those first people chose to work for a wage. Christ said that if you obey my commands, you will be in my kingdom. Being in his kingdom is far better than being in hell. Working a day's work for a day's wage is a whole lot better for a day laborer than going home having nothing to feed his family. They were happy about the deal until they noticed that other people who'd worked less were getting the same deal. This is not just located for us, though, with Jews and Gentiles in the turn of the, I don't know what you would call it, the millennium or whatnot, back in Jesus' days. This is also about the way the church views people today. Because I believe we could apply it very well to those who were raised in the church, who've sought to live an honorable and godly life their whole lives. They've done whatever it was that the word says they're supposed to do to the best of their abilities throughout their days. And then some jackwang that got addicted to drugs, cheated on his first 3 wives, is not married, has kids he's not even raised, and he commits a crime, he goes to jail, and at the last hour he accepts Christ as Lord and Savior. He truly repents of his sin, he turns it around, and he's absolutely honest about it. And he gets heaven too. It rankles a little bit. But then you have to remember that heaven is not something we've earned or deserve. It's the generosity of the Father. And if he chooses to be generous on someone who's done less than we have, remind yourself that you too have received a generous deal. You see, when we compare ourselves to others, we're always in for a bad deal. Either we become prideful or we become depressed. We become disgruntled or we become elated at other people's misfortune and our fortune. But when you look at it and you realize, no matter how good I live, no matter how well I do this thing called life, I don't deserve heaven. He's promised it. I'm expecting it. I don't deserve it. Then Then you can celebrate with the lost one who is found at the last hour, who also gets to spend eternity with us and with Christ and with all the saints in glory. You can have the heart of Christ, who seeks to be generous, wanting no one to go hungry and without. I hope this has challenged you. I hope that you are revising your opinion on people who come to the Lord late in life. And I hope that you continue to seek the little and the lost with the true love of the Lord. May God bless you and keep you. May he cause his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. And may you be gracious to those who come to Christ later in life. And if that's you, today should be that day. Thank you and good night.